Longhorns fall to the Sooners in the Red River Showdown. Longhorn Volleyball sweeps the Iowa State Cyclones at home. And we take a look at the NFL. All this and more on College Press Box. Welcome into College Press Box. I'm your host, John Kelley, and we have a packed show for you tonight. This past Saturday, the Longhorns took on the Oklahoma Sooners in Dallas for the Red River Showdown. Texas was looking to rebound after their loss to TCU last week. Unfortunately, they came up short, but not without a fight, taking the game to 4 overtimes. Let's go to the Cotton Bowl for the highlights. Texas, OU, Red River Showdown. With 13 minutes left in the first quarter, Keontae Ingram takes the handoff, but fumbles on the OU 40. Oklahoma recovers, but can go and kick a field goal. OU leads 3-0. With 6:47 left in the first, Spencer Rattler moves around in the pocket, connects with Marvin Mims for the 30-yard touchdown. OU leads 10-0. With 3:30 left in the first, Spencer Rattler throws down the middle, but the pass is intercepted by DeMarvin Overshone and a return to the OU 11. Texas would end up kicking a field goal. OU leads 10-3. In the second quarter, Spencer Rattler is under pressure and fumbles. Juwan Mitchell recovers for Texas from the OU 19. With 11:44 left in the second, Sam Ehlinger runs it in for the 6-yard touchdown. The game is tied 10-all. Now going to jump to the fourth quarter where OU leads 31-17. With 7 minutes left, Sam Ehlinger throws deep for Joshua Williams, and the pass is picked off by Woody Washington for a touchdown. With 3 minutes left in the fourth, Texas is looking to come back. Ehlinger finds Moore for a 9-yard touchdown. And with just 14 seconds left in the fourth, Ehlinger finds Keontae Ingram for the 2-yard touchdown. Texas tying it up 31-31. In the first overtime, Ehlinger runs it in from 2 yards, giving Texas their first lead of the game, 38-31. Soon after, Spencer Rattler finds a way to tie it back up, finding Austin Stogner for the 11-yard touchdown pass. Now in second overtime, Rattler runs the QB sneak for the touchdown. OU leads 45-38. Ehlinger is quick to respond with a touchdown run of his own, this time from 25 yards out. We're all tied at 45. In the third overtime, Cameron Dicker has his field goal blocked. So if OU makes this field goal, they win. Gabe Burkich lines up, but he shanks it for the 30-yard field goal attempt. The game is going to fourth overtime. In the fourth overtime, Rattler quickly connects with Drake Stoops for the 25-yard touchdown run. They convert the 2-point conversion. OU leads 53-45. And lastly, Ehlinger looks ahead to 5 overtimes, throws deep to the end zone, but is picked off by Trey Brown. OU wins 53-45.
The haphazard nature of the year 2020 did not take a break for the annual Red River Showdown this past Saturday in Dallas, Texas. An instant classic of a game that went to 4 overtimes saw Texas and Oklahoma battling it out, with the Sooners coming out victorious, returning to their home state with the iconic golden hat. The game was sloppy for both teams on both sides of the ball. Texas head coach Tom Herman brought up a laundry list of demands his team needs before moving forward.
We've got to improve on the penalties. We've got to improve our special teams play, and we certainly have to improve our gap integrity defensively, and we got to find ways to defeat man-to-man coverage offensively.
As Herman brought up, the offensive line had difficulty protecting quarterback Sam Ehlinger, who was sacked 6 times in the game. Even with the lack of protection from the O-line, Ehlinger showed what it means to be a leader on this team.
I mean, we got the best leader in the country, in my opinion. We came together and we fought. I mean, that was the main thing that he was telling us, just keep fighting. And it was unfortunate that it went the way it did, but we'll learn from it.
Ehlinger's leadership excelled in the fourth quarter, with Texas down by 14 with 5 minutes left. After tying the game, the Horns tried to keep the tempo in overtime, but were unable to finish the mission.
We always seem to be tripping ourselves up, getting in our own way, making mistakes in crucial times, and the best teams don't do that.
The game provided more questions than answers for Texas after their second loss in a row before the middle of the season. While fans began to have their doubts on this team, Herman and Ellinger think it's way too early to put this season to bed.
We got an opportunity to still have a really, really good season.
The only thing that we can control moving forward is getting back to work and cleaning up the mistakes and learning from it and moving forward. You know, we have a long season the rest of the way, and we're going to play a lot of really good teams. And if we really love the game of football and love playing the game of football, 2 games that slipped away from us isn't going to change the way that we approach the game of football.
Texas has a bye week and is expected to face Baylor next Saturday, October 24th. Reporting from the Cotton Bowl at Fair Park, I'm Justin Morris, TSTV Sports.
Now let's welcome in football analyst Clark Dalton to talk about this agonizing defeat. Clark, losing is never a good thing, especially to Oklahoma. What are your thoughts on this loss?
Well, it's a shame someone had to lose a game that was as great as this one. This is the first time since 1996 that the Red River Rivalry has gone into overtime, let alone 4. And I think the main takeaway for Texas is just the resilience of Sam Ellinger. He had 6 total touchdowns for the Longhorns and nearly 400 yards of offense. And near the end of the fourth quarter, it looked like all was lost. But for Sam Ellinger to show resilience, to show leadership, to show a warrior's heart, proves his character, and he is the leader of this football team, even if Texas was on the losing end.
Absolutely. Sam Ellinger is certainly a cornerstone of this offense and this team. Moving on, after losing their second consecutive game and having their third straight fourth quarter comeback run, what needs to improve for this Texas team moving forward?
The main thing that needs to improve right now is their defense. Over the last 3 games, Texas has allowed 47 points per game. That's a lot. Alan Bowman, Max Duggan, and Spencer Rattler all took open opportunities in the secondary that just burned Texas. The defensive backs, once again, are having trouble staying in front of their man. On the offensive side, there are points in the game where they could go with a little bit more of a tempo offense. For example, in the third quarter, it stayed at 17-31 the whole quarter because Texas kind of got conservative at a certain point. But it seems like when they run that tempo offense with Sam Ellinger, that rather than trying to just completely think about the game, they're just playing the game. It's all reactionary instead. So if they combine those elements, that's really where they can start to make some huge improvements.
Absolutely. Those were definitely big issues in this game, and those will definitely help. The changes will definitely help moving forward. After this disappointing loss, Longhorn fans everywhere are fed up with disappointment and are demanding change. What do you see in the future of the program?
Well, I want to focus on the schedule right now because it's a tough one. Now, this week, we don't know if there's going to be a game with Baylor, actually, because according to Bleacher Report, Baylor has 42 cases of COVID-19 in their football program. So they need to focus on Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State. And those are all 3 really good teams. They play with a certain swagger that Texas needs to adjust to. But I want to look at the big picture of the program. And I think this is something that Texas needs to think about. We always use that phrase, is Texas back? What I think they need to ask is, what do we need to change so Texas can come back? And what I mean by that is, when you keep that phrase in your head, it's kind of putting a pressure on yourself and it's making you emotional. And when emotions go up, that's when intelligence goes down and you start to lose your focus. It's just so polarizing that rather than just focusing on the task at hand, they're not there in the moment. They're not in the here and now. So if Texas just really zeroes in on the process, that's where the program could start to make a leap back. Yeah, it's hard because there's a lot of pressure at this program. It has a rich tradition and the fans want it to be elite right away, but you just need to focus on every single little step because that doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it makes it much more manageable and it makes you process driven. And when you're process driven, that leads you to results.
Absolutely, Clark. Process is key. And without it, you lead to penalties and mistakes, especially as we saw in the TCU game and this past week in Oklahoma. Well, thank you, Clark, for joining us. When we come back, we'll discuss the continued upward trend of Longhorn volleyball. Welcome back to College Press Box. This past week, Texas Volleyball hosted the Iowa State Cyclones at the Frank Erwin Center. In the first match on Thursday, Longhorns swept 3-0, with 14 kills by Logan Eggleston, 9 by Breon Butler, and 8 by Skylar Fields. On Friday, the Longhorns also swept 3-0, but not without a fight by the Cyclones. In the third set, Iowa State was trailing by at least 15-21, but still managed to finish with 21 points. Sophomore Molly Phillips shone this match with 8 kills, in addition to kills by Eggleston and Butler. Now let's welcome volleyball analyst Alyssa Molina. These were impressive wins by an impressive team. Amongst these games, though, who stood out to you as an MVP?
Yeah, John, so I'm going to have to go with number 33, junior Logan Eggleston. She is having a remarkable season. She's one of the keys to the Texas offense and has paced Texas in kills every single time this season. In back-to-back sweeps against Iowa, she had a combined total of 30 kills as well as 15 digs and 5 aces. She hit .417 in the first match, which is pretty amazing for being an outside hitter. Eggleston remains the most dangerous offensive weapon this season for Texas volleyball.
Absolutely. Logan Eggleston has shown this year and past years, and she's certainly a cornerstone of this Texas team. That being said, despite both matches being sweeps over the Cyclones, is there anything this team needs to improve on?
I mean, honestly, it's hard to say they need to improve anywhere. They have done such an amazing job this season. They've had mistakes here and there, but you have to make mistakes to get better. It's all part of the game. The Longhorns are ranked first in the Big 12 in opponent hitting percentages, assists, kills, and blocks per set. One of the biggest things the team could work on is their conditioning. Out of their 6 games this season, only one of those has gone 4 sets. Head coach Jarrett Elliott mentioned this in the post-match conference. They have yet to go 5 sets, and in case they do, they need to make sure they are physically prepared for it.
Absolutely. Being prepared for those long games is definitely a necessity, especially when playing against some of the bigger teams coming up. And as Texas is ranked number 1 in the nation, they're clear front runners in the bid for the championship. Who do you think is the biggest threat for this team that can make them go those 5 sets?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Baylor on this one. Right now, they're ranked right behind Texas at number 2 with a record of 3-1. And last year, they took down Texas, the number 1 team in the country for the first time since 2001. Their biggest threat on the Bears is number 22 senior All-American Luciana Presley, who is an outside hitter. She was one of the biggest contributors to Baylor's win over Texas last year with 31 kills and 24 digs for the Bears. Presley is back this year, and she has had a remarkable season so far. Baylor also has number 14, a sophomore transfer from North Carolina, Lauren Harrison, who has fit right into the team and has been a game leader this season. Both teams are strong both offensively and defensively and are not going to give up without putting up a fight. Texas and Baylor are set to play each other for the first time this season on November 5th and 6th in Austin at the Frank Erwin Center.
Absolutely. Baylor is such an incredible team. Last year, the Texas-Baylor matchups were some of the most exciting in the entire season in NCAA volleyball. Well, thank you, Alyssa, so much for coming on. When we come back, Jordan Geelhoed will discuss the past week in the NFL. Welcome back to College Press Box. This past week has certainly been exciting for professional football fans. For a roundup of last week's NFL matchups, here's Jordan Geelhoed.
Thank you so much, John. Yeah, we had a lot of intriguing activity in yesterday's NFL games, and here we're going to start with just one highlight from each of the game, some of the best ones. Here we start in Arrowhead with the Oakland Raiders putting the boot into the Kansas City Chiefs, Derek Carr, loading it up for Henry Ruggs, the speedster out of Alabama, who catches it, and there's no one catching him at that point. Raiders pulled off a shocking upset in Kansas City, and even then, Kansas City played well. Here we go, Ben Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh going to the rookie Chase Claypool, who had 4 touchdowns. What a monster game for Chase Claypool it was. The Steelers' offense held on in a not as good Steelers defense performance, but here was a really good Steelers defense performance was in the Ravens game. Marlon Humphrey strip sacked. Patrick Queen ran it back for a touchdown. Joe Burrow and the Bengals could not get it started against Baltimore. Their defense was an absolute curtain in that game. There was a number 1 overall QB pick in that game, and let's go to another one with Kyler Murray, who loads it up for DeAndre Hopkins here and hits him right for the game-clinching touchdown. Goes through the hit, and what an incredible catch that was for DeAndre Hopkins. And here's Deshaun Watson and the Texans versus the Jaguars. Brandon Cooks, the speedster, hitting him, and he burns the defenders for the touchdown, clinching the game for Houston. And from the AFC South to the NFC South, we have Teddy Bridgewater carving up the Falcons secondary, hitting DJ Moore, and he just hits the Jets off the races down the sideline in a comfortable win for Carolina in Atlanta on that one. Alex Smith came back for the Washington football team. However, it was not a fun day for him, as you see Aaron Donald and his buddies getting to the backfield, sacking Alex Smith 8 times. Not good for a guy with a reformed leg. Washington won that game handily. And surprisingly, the Dolphins here won this game handily in Santa Clara. Ryan Fitzpatrick hits Preston Williams right down the seam. Fitzpatrick was Fitzmagic today in a stunner against San Francisco. And here we have one of the only 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns coming from the Browns versus Colts game. The Colts have a very good defense and special teams, as showcased here, as the returner cuts it upfield and hits the afterburners. Indianapolis couldn't hold on to Cleveland for very long as Cleveland pulled away, but this was an incredible play nonetheless. Cleveland improves to 4-1, and New York and Dallas facing each other. There was a lot of sloppy play in this game. This was just one of them, as the ball tips off of Ezekiel Elliott's hand into the Giants linebacker, and he takes it all the way in for a touchdown. New York went up 2 scores in that one, although they couldn't unfortunately hold on, and Russell Wilson orchestrating the game-winning drive on the last play of the game, 4th and goal, puts the ball into the hands of DK Metcalf, his star wide receiver, holds on to an undefeated record in Seattle for that one. And those were just some of the highlights that we saw, and I'm going to go back into some of the games from a more in-depth analysis, going back to Arrowhead, the Raiders, and the Chiefs. The Chiefs defense, who's looked surprisingly good all season, just couldn't contain Vegas. Derek Carr threw for 350 yards, 3 touchdowns. Josh Jacobs had his way with that front 7, and the Chiefs are now down to 4-1. The Raiders are 3-2, and they're in the same division. That was a division loss. Kansas City has to be looking over their shoulder. Winning the AFC West won't come as easy to them this time around. The Keystone State battles of the Eagles and the Steelers saw the traditionally stifling Pittsburgh defense look a little bit porous against Philadelphia. They allowed multiple touchdowns to Miles Sanders and to Carson Wentz throwing. But as you saw, Chase Claypool, the rookie, had one of the best performances we've seen all season from a rookie. 4 touchdowns, incredible. The Steelers remain undefeated and remain on top of the AFC North. And speaking of the AFC North, if we go to that division battle between the Bengals and the Ravens, we maybe had a chance for a classic Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Heisman battle, but the Ravens defense had other plans, and they blew them out, caused 3 turnovers, 7 sacks, and allowed only 3 points off of a garbage time field goal. The Ravens offense looked a little bit pedestrian in Ravens offense terms. They look good in other offense terms, but that defense was just a curtain. And the Cardinals and Jets game, Joe Flacco filling in for the injured Sam Darnold, Le'Veon Bell coming back off of IR, but that wasn't enough to stop Kyler Murray, as he had over 400 yards from scrimmage. And DeAndre Hopkins is not human. He had 130 yards in the game-clinching touchdown. How did the Texans give that man up? I know we mention it every single time we mention DeAndre Hopkins, but if we're going to the team that no longer has DeAndre Hopkins, the Texans had their first game without Bill O'Brien after the long overdue firing, and Romeo Crennel stepped in as the interim head coach. It was a very sloppy game. There were multiple turnovers, multiple missed field goals, but the Texans did manage to get their first W on the season, so maybe that team's not dead. And the Jaguars have now lost 11 of their last 13 matchups with the Texans. That is not good. So if we go from the AFC South to the NFC South, the Panthers and the Falcons, the Panthers held on to this game through and through. Mike Davis did his best Christian McCaffrey impression. Teddy Bridgewater dismantled the far from fearsome Falcons defense as the Panthers improved to 3-2, and pending the results of the Saints game today, could be at the top of the NFC South. The Falcons are at a low point at 0-5, and as of yesterday, fired their head coach Dan Quinn, who some thought was long overdue. And one of the biggest stories of the early games was the return of Alex Smith for the Washington football team, a man who very few thought would ever play football again. Some thought he wouldn't even walk again, lined up under center and took the field. However, as you saw, his O-line did him no favors. Aaron Donald and the Rams racked up 8 sacks. Hey, maybe protect the guy with the newly reformed leg. That's just a suggestion, Washington O-line. Jared Goff on the other side of the ball gashed Washington's defense for over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was a pretty one-sided affair. And the first of the 3 late games was also a one-sided affair, but not in the way you would expect. The 49ers and the Dolphins. The Niners received Jimmy Garoppolo and Raheem Mostert back from injury, and Mostert was good in his return, though maybe they should have let Jimmy G sit another week. In the first half, he posted a measly passer rating of 15 and was benched in the second. And with Miami, you got some Fitz magic. Posted a stat line of 350 yards, 3 touchdowns with only 6 incompletions. The Dolphins were surprisingly potent, and that game was never really close. It was one of the biggest shockers of the new season and one of the most competitive games of the day. The Colts and the Browns. As you saw, the Colts leaned on their defense and their special teams. They caused 4 turnovers, but they couldn't contain the Browns' offense still, even with those mistakes. Baker Mayfield put up high numbers. The run game did their thing. The game came to within the final 2 minutes, but the Browns held on to improve to 4-1, which is the first time they've started with a 4-1 record since 1994 when Bill Belichick was their head coach. So, maybe there's some competition brewing in the AFC North. I don't know if there's any competition brewing in the NFC East, however, or not good competition at least, with the division matchup with the Giants and the Cowboys. This game was competitive, however, it was defined by tragedy. In a season already decimated by injuries, Dak Prescott went down with a scary-looking ankle injury, and he was carted off the field. Andy Dalton was brought in to finish the game, and the Cowboys did emerge with the win, but it's hard to feel good about it with the loss of their franchise quarterback. It's a devastating blow. Prescott has already had surgery on his ankle, and we wish him a speedy recovery and good health. And finally, the last game of the day, on a rainy Sunday night in Seattle, we had the Vikings and the Seahawks. The Vikings, who were in a must-win situation after a dismal start to their season, looked good in the first half, but you can't contain Russell Wilson for long as he came roaring back within 5 points and orchestrating a final drive down to the goal line. Wilson put the ball in the hands of DK Metcalf, as you saw in that highlight, to catch the TD and secure a Seahawks victory. Some final thoughts I leave you with. Despite their upset loss at home, I still think the Chiefs are the best team so far this season, but they have now shown that they're beatable, and the 4-0 Bills play them next week. That should be an interesting game. Russell Wilson, after his performance, is still my way too early MVP frontrunner, and also give Alex Smith the Comeback Player of the Year award now. Knowing his story and everything he went through, even playing another snap of football is a legitimate miracle. And lastly, as we said, prayers up for Dak Prescott. He's such a talented player, such an instrumental part of that Cowboys team. Seems like a good dude, and you never want to see an injury like this, but I have faith that he'll get through it. He's a fighter. We all wish him a safe and speedy recovery. Thank you, John. I probably rambled for too long, but it's back to you.
Thank you, Jordan. We all certainly hope that Dak Prescott gets better soon. When we come back, we'll take a look at some of the former Longhorns' performances in the NFL. Welcome back to College Press Box. Let's take a look at how former Longhorns are doing in the NFL. Let's start off by looking at Colin Johnson down in Jacksonville. Despite not producing much so far this season, with only 5 receptions and 47 yards, last Saturday he recorded his first NFL touchdown of what is hopefully many more to come. Next, let's move to the AFC North, where Deshaun Elliott was not making things easy for Joe Burrow and the Bengals on Saturday, where he recorded 5 tackles and a sack for the Ravens defense. Sticking with the Ravens, one would be remiss not to mention Devin Duvernay, who put on the Jets against the Bengals with a speedy 42-yard dash. He also recorded 2 catches for 17 yards. Lastly, let's head to Arizona, where Jordan Hicks was shaking up the Jets' offense with an impressive 9 tackles. After this game, he has made a total of 42 and is projected for 134 by the end of the season. Over at Mike A. Myers Stadium, the Longhorns soccer team made magic with an impressive 7-0 victory over the Kansas State Wildcats. A stellar win for what has so far been a dismal season, going 1-3 before last Friday's matchup. Texas brought the heat early with a goal by Haley Berg in only the second minute. A third of the way through, Emma Reagan knocked one in off a penalty kick. At the 60-minute mark, Julia Grasso scored. Cameron Brooks, Lauren Oliver, and Presley Eccles all scored within 5 minutes of each other around the 70-minute mark. Lastly, Kaylee Smith punched one in right at the end of regulation. The Horns defense held strong, with the Wildcats only able to achieve one shot on goal. Next, let's head to the links as the Longhorns women's golf team earned silver this past weekend at the Betsy Rawls Invitational here in Austin. Senior Caitlin Papp recorded her 10th collegiate top 5 finish and her 20th collegiate top 10 individual finish. Sophomore Sophie Guo tied for 16th with an even par. Junior Haley Cooper and freshman Ashley Park tied for 19th. Freshman Bentley Cotton tied for 22nd. And senior Kelley Zach, competing as an individual, placed 51st. Their next appearance is later this month at the East Lake Cup in Atlanta, Georgia. Now over to the basketball court, where it was announced Wednesday night that the Maui Invitational bracket has been set. The Longhorns will begin the tournament against the Davidson Wildcats on November 30th. Due to the pandemic, the tournament will be located in Asheville, North Carolina this year. Now it's time for This Week in Longhorn Sports. On Friday the 16th, women's tennis will play in the Texas A&M Invitation in College Station, and the men's tennis team will play in the TCU Invitational up in Fort Worth. Also on Friday, volleyball will take on the Kansas State Wildcats in Manhattan. You can catch that on ESPNU at 4 p.m. And the Longhorn soccer team will play Iowa State Cyclones also on Friday in Ames at 6 p.m., and you can catch that on ESPN+. On Saturday the 17th, Longhorn Track and Field will be participating at the Arturo Barrios Invitational in College Station. Lastly, volleyball is back at it again in Manhattan against Kansas State at 6:30 p.m. on ESPNU. That's it for this edition of College Press Box. Be sure to tune in Wednesday night for College Crossfire with the best sports debate on the 40 acres, and Friday morning for the 1-0 Sports Show to satisfy all your sports talk needs going into the weekend. For everyone on air and behind the scenes, I'm John Kelley. Have a good evening.